mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So at this time, let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you once again just for the blessing of this day. I thank you for just keeping us safe, dear Lord, and allowing us to get to where we are this week, dear Lord. Thank you for our just a place to meet, dear Lord. Thank you for giving us a place for St. Joseph, dear Lord, opening up this gymnasium for us, dear Lord. In the past that you give Crosspoint, dear Lord, giving us a place to meet, the freedom of worship, dear Lord, and the country we live in that we're able to do this, dear Lord. I pray for our soldiers and our government, dear Lord, the times that we are in, dear Lord. And I pray, dear Lord, that you just bless us as a church, dear Lord. Open our eyes this year, as this coming year, and help us to fulfill the purpose that you have for us. Guide us in each and every step that we have. I pray, dear Lord, to be with Dave as he's on his trip, dear Lord, and give him, I pray, keep his path straight and open up the doors, dear Lord, that he may minister to those, dear Lord, where he's at, and just be a blessing, dear Lord, to you and to the people that he's ministering to today, dear Lord, in this week. I pray, dear Lord, that you just be with us, with Don as he brings the message today. Open his eyes, dear Lord, and let him be guided by the Spirit, dear Lord, and open our hearts, dear Lord, to your word, and open our minds, and with all the distractions that's in our lives, dear Lord, I pray we can just close them out and just look at you today. And dear Lord, I pray as there are some as I just read that may be poor in spirit right now, dear Lord, some that are mourning, I know, dear Lord, because we have some that's lost loved ones this week in their lives, dear Lord. Those, dear Lord, that are just hungry and thirsty for your righteousness and for justice in their lives, dear Lord, and just trying to seek answers, dear Lord. You know each and every one's heart that's here, that's walked into this place. And, dear Lord, this is no mistake that we're here. It's a divine appointment that you've given us, dear Lord, even if it's just for a routine that we get up on Sunday morning, dear Lord. We are here for a reason. I pray that you just open our eyes spiritually, and I pray you fulfill that in our hearts, dear Lord, that we can see you right now. Lord, I pray as we get into our worshiping time, Lord, that our hearts will open up to you and that you will touch us through your Spirit. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Truth and know We wanna see Jesus lifted high. We wanna see Jesus lifted high. Step by step, we're moving forward, little by little, taking ground. Every prayer is a powerful weapon. Strongholds all come tumbling down, 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 and down. We wanna see Jesus lifted high. We wanna see Jesus lifted high. Lightning McQueen over here. I call him Trout, but Lightning McQueen is really his guitar name. Trust the sweetest flame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest flame, but only trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, we made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. Darkness seems to hide His face, I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil. My anchor holds within the veil. Christ alone, cornerstone, we made strong in the Savior's love. Through the storm, He is Lord, Lord of all. When He shall come, the trumpet sound. Oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone, from the stand before the throne. For the stand before the throne, Christ alone, cornerstone, we made strong in the Savior's love. Through the
Lord, thank you for this opportunity to be together, to gather together. We pray that you would help us to encourage each other as you have called us to do, and help us to be open to your words of truth. For they are a lamp for our feet and a light for our path, and they give us direction. So open our hearts and our minds, not only to receive your word, but to take it in and to live your words. For they are light, they are truth. Lord, we look to you now. We just pray your blessings and your best. Be with Don as he brings a message. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Okay, is it on? Yes, okay. All right. Good morning. We're going to talk this morning about the Sermon on the Mount, and it's a tough one. The Sermon on the Mount has got some of the hardest sayings that Jesus said, and I think we need to look into this. Two ways. Basically, he talks about two ways. All the way through the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about two different ways. And some are on the narrow path, and some are on the wide path. And some are going to go through the wide gate that leads to destruction, and some on the narrow gate that leads to everlasting. So Randy read the Sermon on the Mount. He read the first part, which I'll read through here again real quick. In Matthew chapter 5 and verse 1. Now we're not going to talk a lot about this, but this is what most people think of on the Sermon on the Mount. They think of these first few verses, the Beatitudes. It says, "And seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came to him." So they came to him. In Matthew, it looks like it's just his disciples, but if you go to Luke, there's other people that come also. But this is more of a message towards his disciples, and he's contrasting two different ways. So the disciples come to him, he opened up his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now, kingdom of heaven. Now, this is important. 9, 10 times he talks about the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, thy kingdom, the gospel of the kingdom in this passage. A little in chapter 4 he talks that he went through the land preaching the gospel of the kingdom. So what do you think this is about? If he says it 6 times, he says kingdom of heaven. Once he says the kingdom of God. Once he says the city of the great king. So he keeps talking about the king. Now, this time of year, this time of our cycle, we have a lot of people that are going around trying to get elected as president. And what they do is they say, this is what I'm going to do if I'm elected president. This is my program. This is what I'm aiming for. And Jesus, he sets down the rules for his kingdom in this. Now, the Sermon on the Mount is almost maybe the longest, maybe the second longest discourse you have in the Bible from Jesus, what Jesus says. Chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7 is all the Sermon on the Mount, and it's one of the longest discourses that he gives in the Bible. Now, in John, when he's talking to his disciples, that might be a little bit longer, but this is one of the longest continuous speeches, so it's important. This is he's setting things up, and he's talking about his kingdom. And this first part that we're reading here is the attitudes that we should have in his kingdom. So we'll read on. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. Okay, so on the Sermon on the Mount, we have Jesus presenting the kingdom. Chuck Missler talks about it being the manifesto of the kingdom. Now, when you read the whole thing, though, which is what we're going to cover today, not the whole thing, but we're going to hit some certain spots, it's kind of it's a hard thing when you read it. Now, there was a woman, Mary Stemo, and she's a writer, wrote a bunch of books, but she also was an English teacher in college. What she did, she gave her students the lesson or the thing to read the Sermon on the Mount. Now, this is a secular college. Now, a lot of you have read the Sermon on the Mount, and we have a history of being used to hearing the Sermon on the Mount. But these are people who probably never ever read the whole Sermon on the Mount. So for English, she had them read it and comment on it. So when they read it, they came back. They were totally appalled by what Jesus said here. They came back and they said, "This is ridiculous. It's like he expects you to be perfect, and nobody's perfect." And so what it is they had not seen it. We've seen it, we get used to it, but when you really read it, it really has a lot of hard sayings in it. Now, Jesus is up on the mount. I think this is kind of significant. And the first thing he talks about, of course, is the law. But I want to go back in Exodus, when Moses got the children out of Israel out of Egypt, in chapter 19, it says he went up onto a mount. And it was Mount Sinai. And he gave the 10 Commandments. Now Jesus in this, he's going to talk about the commandments. He's going to talk several of these commandments that Jesus gave. But one of the things he said on the mount, in Exodus chapter 19, verse 24, it says, "And the Lord said unto him, Away, get thee down, and thou shalt come up, thou and Aaron with thee. But let not the priests and the people break through to come up unto the Lord, lest he break forth upon them." And what's that all about? And he said, there's a cloud on the mountain. Now, sometime you have to get a message on Genesis or Exodus chapter 19. It's crazy scary. They're up on the mount, there's smoke, there's lightning, there's thunder, the earth is quaking, and then there's a trumpet sounding, and it gets louder and louder. And then what God does in chapter 19 is he speaks the 10 Commandments. And the people all go away. And they say, "Moses, you talk to God and you tell us, but we don't want to hear his voice because they're frightened. The glory of God would break upon." Now, to understand this, I think you need to think about this. If you were to look at the sun, how long in the noonday can you look at the sun? For a few seconds, you just look and get away. Why? Because it's too much. And it'll burn your eyes out. The glory of it is too much. Just think if you took a spacecraft and headed towards to the sun, like where Mercury is, and the sun's all big. Can you imagine looking at the sun? No, it would overwhelm you. And that's the glory of God. And when we see the Sermon on the Mount, we see the glory of God. And it's kind of frightening. And so, the hard sayings, there's like four I'll mention. There's more than this, but four of them I want you to think about these things that he said. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 18, he says this. He says, "For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled." He says, not one jot. Now that's a little line. There's a little dot for vowel pointing or something, and then there's a tittle, a little line. It's the smallest things. He says it's all going to be fulfilled. He says none will pass. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, it says, "And I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now, we're used to this, but you got to imagine yourself being back then, what the Jews that were speaking. Now, what the Jews did, the Pharisees did, and the scribes, is they kept the law. That's what they did. So, like I got this Geico commercial. You've probably seen it. I mean, I've seen it many times. I just laugh. Moms call at the worst times. That's what they do. That's just what they do. And, the guy's being chased by these guys, and he's trying to get help back up, and his mom calls, "Hey, squirrels are in the attic again," But that's what moms do. Well, the Pharisees, what did they do? They kept the law. I mean, they worried about, they had a little garden with herbs in it. I don't want to say herbs. Herbs, mint, thyme. They had a little patch. They would take a little 10% of it, cut it out, and give it as a tithe. They were all about keeping the law. That's what they did. And Jesus says to them this saying here, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. Now to me, that's kind of scary. Okay, I think about my own self, my own personal experience. When I read the Sermon on the Mount, I think, whoa, what about my righteousness? What about me? Do I exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees? And then he says in chapter 5, verse 48, he says, be therefore perfect as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Now if you drive 74 to Batesville, which I did all week, there's a sign out there and it says, be perfect. Okay, be perfect. So I kept thinking about that verse. So it says to be a perfect parent. You don't have to be a perfect parent to be a foster parent or something like that, is what that was. But Jesus says, be therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Now commentators say, well, it doesn't mean sinlessly perfect. It means mature. You should be mature. Kind of soften it up a little bit. Okay, let's go with that. Be perfect, be mature as the Father is mature. Is that good? Is that okay? That softened it up a little bit for you? That's what Jesus said. That's pretty rough, huh? And then the I don't know how you say it, coup de grace, coup de grace, I don't know. Matthew chapter 7, verse 22. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? And then I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Now these are people who are prophesying, preaching in Jesus' name, and they're casting out devils, and they're doing wonderful works. And Jesus says, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. Now I don't know about you, but when I read that, I thought, whoa. Whoa. This is pretty serious here. And so we want to look at this. We want to look at the Sermon on the Mount, go a little more in detail. So the Sermon on the Mount, it has basically, there's probably more, but I noted 7 different areas, and then at the end, 3 metaphors that he deals with. So the first one is the Beatitudes, which is what we read. The next thing, he says, you're to be salt and light. We're not going to cover that, but the Christians should be salt and light in the world. And third, he spends a lot of time talking about the commandments, the law. Spends a lot of time about that. Then in chapter 6, he talks about your religious life. He talks about 3 things. Giving alms, giving, talks about prayer, and he talks about fasting. Okay? I didn't know how to term that, but I said your religious life. And there's two different ways of doing that. And then he talks about your financial life. He said you're supposed to have treasure in heaven. And then he talks about your everyday life. He says, don't worry about what we shall eat or what we shall drink or what we shall put on, for God knows what you need and he'll take care of you. And so, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things shall be added unto you. Then lastly, he talks about judging others and judging in particular. So, we're going to talk about the three, the law, the religious life, and judging. We're going to look at those three. But then at the end, he gives three metaphors. He talks about two paths and two gates. He talks about two trees, two fruits. He talks about two houses with two different foundations. And we're going to try to get into that too. So, now what he does is he doesn't say these people are bad, these people don't keep the law, these people are just sinners, and these people keep the law. These are not what he contrasts in this sermon. What he contrasts is these people keep the commandments and these people keep the commandments. Okay? These people give and these people give. These people pray and these people pray. These people fast and these people fast. Okay, now we would think if a person gives and he keeps the commandments of God and he fasts and he prays, we would say that person's probably a Christian, right? You would think he does that. But Jesus says, no, there's two different ways. He's dividing these two groups. That's why we need to be careful. So that's why we need to look into it. There's two ways of righteousness. They both keep commandments, they both give, they both pray, they both fast, and they both judge. So let's look at the first one. Let's look at the law. Let's go into there. In Matthew chapter 5 and verse 17, it says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill." Now, why would they think that Jesus came to destroy the law? Why would they think that? Because Jesus was going out there and he was touching lepers. And he was eating with publicans. And he was doing good things to sinners. And they thought, well, he must be against the law. Because he's not upholding the law. The law says, these sinners need to be punished, and Jesus is being gracious to them. So he says, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever there shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoso shall do and teach them, shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven." So, he covers 5 different areas in the law. First he talks about thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder, okay? That's the first commandment. That's one of the 10 commandments. Then he talks about thou shalt not commit adultery. That's one of the 10 commandments. Then he talks about thou shalt not forswear thyself, about keeping oaths. And then he talks about an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And then he talks about thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemies, what he says. You've heard it been said. So let's get into that. In verse 21, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder. It says in verse 21, "Ye have heard that it's been said of them of old time, thou shalt not kill. And whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment." Okay, that's what the commandment is. He says, you've heard that. You've heard the commandment. And then verse 22, he says, "But I say unto you." Now this is really significant. Those were what God spoke on Mount Sinai. And he says, you've heard, thou shalt not kill, but I say unto you. Now, wow, at the end of this, they said, boy, he spoke with authority. He says, you heard this, but listen to what I'm saying. Well, who could say something like that? God says this, I say this. Who is this person? He says, but I say unto you, whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of judgment. And whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council. And whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Agree with thy adversary quickly, whilst thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. Verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. Okay, so what's he doing? He says, you've heard don't kill, but I say don't be even angry. Now what's Jesus doing? Is it like a high jump? I never could jump, maybe a 3-inch vertical, but people would, better get away from that speaker. In high school, you got the high jump, and some people can jump it, and that's what the Pharisees were doing. They said, "Here's thou shalt not kill." Okay, I can do that. I can jump that. They were trying to keep the law. What did Jesus say? Don't even be angry. Now, what was Jesus doing? Was he raising the bar? Was he saying, "Okay, we got a 5-foot bar. No, we're going to raise it to 10 feet"? Is that what he was doing? What do you think? Was he just raising the bar? At first, that's what I thought he was doing. But I don't think that's what he was doing. I think what he was doing was, why do you want to kill somebody? Because you're angry with them. Okay? And what he does is he says, it's not the outward action, it's in the inward heart. Because out of the heart comes forth murders and adulteries and stuff like that. And he says, what you need is a heart change. The Pharisees, they thought, okay, I can do that. I won't murder. I wouldn't mind killing some people sometime. Mike McConnell, I think he's on the radio again in Cincinnati, but I remember in times past, some of you might know WLW, Mike McConnell. He used to say this: everybody should have at least one chance, or should be able to kill one person one time in their life and get away with it. That's what he said. Because, what is he thinking? Everybody would be dead. But he said, I think everyone should be able to kill people, one person. And what was he meaning? Well, he thought, well, if you did, you wouldn't cross somebody. You wouldn't, cut somebody off, because that person might not have killed anybody yet, and this might be the day he decides to use his card. Okay? And that's what he was thinking. That's what the Pharisees think. They think it's okay to hate. You just can't commit the act. The only reason people don't commit the act is because of the punishment. If they could get away with it, they would probably do it, and that's what they found out. They did a study on these riots, where people have riots, and all of a sudden these good people go and do bad things. And what they ascribed it to was mass hysteria. And so some people went and they talked to the people who did things like, there was a riot going on, and they would go ahead and steal something or do something wrong. And they said, they tried to find out, why did they do that? Normally they never would do that. And they said, why did you do that? And they said, oh, we knew what we were doing, but we knew we never would get caught, because everybody was doing it. We could get away with it. So the heart is the problem. And the only thing that keeps the heart from doing stuff is the fear of punishment. So the reason people do things is because of fear of punishment. And it's not because their heart loves. And Jesus is saying here, you're not supposed to, don't be angry. He says, you got to get that heart's got to be changed. It's not enough just to keep the law. You got to have the heart. And so, then he says, thou shalt not commit adultery, chapter 5, verse 27. Ye have heard that it is said of them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. So notice that, the heart, they thought, okay, it's good enough, I don't do it. No, they said, Jesus says it's the heart. That's the problem. And then he says, this is so over the top. Okay, I'm going to read this. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Now, everyone who agrees with this, raise their right hand. Okay, we wouldn't have the right. What was Jesus saying? I don't see a lot of Christians without right hands or right eyes. What he was saying is, this is serious. This is really serious. So it's not the outward action; it's the inward. It's the inward thing. Now, kind of to illustrate this with the story of Tim Keller. I get a lot of stuff from Tim Keller. He gives a story of the carrot. So we're going to talk about the carrot. There was this farmer that had this garden, and he grew carrots and stuff, and he grew a really big carrot. And so he said, I'm going to give that to the king. I love the king. And the king was coming by, and he took the carrot, the big carrot, and he said, King, because I love you and I honor you, I want to give you this carrot. This is the biggest one I've grown, and I just want to honor you by giving this to you. And the king appreciated that. He said, you know what? He said, I've got a half acre of ground close to where your ground is. He said, you can have that half acre, and you can grow more carrots. And he blessed him with that. And one of his lords heard what happened. And so he brought this horse later on, this beautiful horse to the king. He said, King, I love you. And I want to give you this horse because I honor you. And the king knew what was going on. And he said, thanks, and went on. and then he stopped and he said, that farmer gave me the carrot because he loved me. You gave the horse for yourself. You gave it for you. It was all about you. It wasn't about your love for me. It was about you. A lot of the reason people keep the commandments because it's about them. It's not because they love God. It's not because they love their neighbor. It's because it's about them. It's centered on them. Okay, he gets worse. Chapter 5, verse 38. And you have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, in the Old Testament, that's what he said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now, the reason he said this is because what would happen is, and you've probably done this, your brother hits you once. So what do? You hit him twice. Right? Okay? It's not enough to get even. It's escalated. And so in the Old Testament, he says an eye for an eye. No more. It's not. You don't escalate things. And a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Okay, so I've heard people talk about this. So they say, okay, somebody comes up to you, Eric, then he goes, bah! So what do? You turn the other cheek. No, you turn the other cheek. And then, bah! Now, it doesn't say anything after he hits the other cheek. I've heard people say, okay, so what you do is after you get hit on the other cheek, then it's game on. Okay? Then we get even. Okay? So, is that what Jesus was saying? I don't think so. He goes on, I'll get back to this, but he says, and if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. So somebody sues you, and for something, you say, okay, that's not enough. I'm going to give you more. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain, go two. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow thee, turn thou not away. I've heard beggars quote that verse down Fountain Square. Okay, that's what Jesus said. What do we do with this? What do we do with this? Now, I think when he talks about turning the other cheek, what they would do, they used to kiss each other. I know my brother's in Ukraine, that's what, when he first went over there, when church, they would kiss each other with a holy kiss. You know, that's what they did. Now, my brother and the guy he works with, they didn't really, culturally, that's not exactly something we like to do. So they kind of cut that out, you know. But they would kiss. Now, so what you do when you kiss on the cheek, you turn the cheek here, kiss. And so what Jesus was saying is, they hit you on this cheek. And you say, okay, I understand you hit me, but I still want a relationship with you. I still want us to have communion. I'm offering you a cheek. I'm going to keep coming. I'm going to keep coming so that we can be together. We're not going to, it's not that I'm going to wait and then, oh, you're going to get yours. Because that's what Jesus is. God is love. And he keeps coming. And then about taking the law coat, he says, this is so over the top. I mean, if you really think about this, somebody sues you, they want to give $10,000 from you. He said, well, why don't you just take 20? Is that what we do? That's what he says. Is that over the top or is that not over the top? I mean, this is something, huh? Okay. Love your enemies. Chapter 5, verse 43. You have heard that it has been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. Okay, I got that. You have heard that it has been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor. I'm thinking, sometimes I have a hard time loving my neighbor. I mean, we haven't got to the tough part yet. I had to pick up somebody from the airport, and I was sitting there just watching. I was thinking about these verses, and seeing these people all coming, and I think, well, would you love that person? Would you love that person? I thought, man, Lord, help me to love people, you know? And he says, love thy neighbor. But then he goes so far beyond. He says, but I say to you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you, and do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same. So Jesus says God loves his enemies. God sends the sunshine on the good and the evil. He blesses them. And he wants us to be like that. He wants us to love our enemies. And this is so over the top. You can imagine when they first heard this, they're just, and if we just really listen to what he's saying, how important this is. Okay, so I better, my goodness, is it really? Is it 10:23? Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I have two messages here. So anyways, he goes into religious life. He talks about giving alms. He says, when you give alms, when you pray, when you fast, go in the closet. Don't do it out in the open, but do it in secret. Because if you do it in secret, that's what's real. What you really do, what you do in secret, what you think in secret, that's who you are. Not what you do out in front of everybody, but what you do in secret. That's who you are. And so he says, when you do these things, do them in secret, not out in the open. Then he goes into judging. He says, judge not, lest ye be judged. For with what judgment ye judge, it shall be judged to you again. So, when you say, people ought to do this. Have you ever said this? People ought to do something? What if there was a tape recorder around your neck? Every time you said people ought to do something, it was recorded. People that never heard the gospel, you know what? In their tribes, in their area, they're saying, that's not right what you're doing. This ain't right what you're doing. That's not right. Because they know what's right in their heart. And when Judgment Day comes, God turns on that tape recorder and says, you said this, it wasn't right. Did you do it? You knew what was right. Just out of your own words. In Luke chapter 19, it says, and he saith unto them, out of thine own mouth will I judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up what I lay down, and reaping that I did not sow. So, if we judge others, we'll judge ourselves. So, we'll close out here real quick on the Pharisee and the publican. In Luke chapter 18, it says, and he spake this parable unto certain which trusted in themselves that they were righteous, and despised others. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a publican. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank thee that I am not as other men are, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this publican. I fast twice in a week, I give tithes of all that I possess. And the publican, standing afar off, would not lift up so much as his eyes to heaven, but smote upon his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you that this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For every one that exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. And when Jesus talked about the religious life, he says, or about judging, he says, judge yourself first. Take the beam out of your own eye first, and then you can judge other people. Then he says, then you can help other people take the speck out of their eye. And what happened here, the Pharisee, he was judging the publican. He says, that guy's not right. He was always worried about him. And that's what we got to be careful of. We judge other people. And Jesus says, no. Judge yourself. That's your priority. Number one, judge yourself. Don't judge other people. Judge yourself. And then you can see clearly to help other people out. Now, the publican, he said, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. He judged himself. He said, he recognized who he was. And therefore he judged himself. Where the Pharisee, he could not see that. All he could see is the sins of other people. And so he judged him. And the Pharisee, or the publican, could have said this, I thank thee, O God, that I am not as other men, pretending to be something they are not, or even as this Pharisee. I drink, I cuss, I fool around, but I'm no hypocrite. I am who I am, an honest man. Now, there's Pharisees in the church, and then there's Pharisees outside the church. I mean, they're all over the place. So, but they're not judging themselves. And we got to judge ourselves. So then he gets into the last three. And the 2 gates, the 2 trees, and the 2 houses. Okay, so the last one, I just want to, because of lack of time, we're going to talk about the 2 houses. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, I will liken unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon the house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, he shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and it beat upon the house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Okay, so we had 2 gates, we had 2 trees, and now we're talking about the two houses that are built. One's built upon the rock, and one is built upon the sand. You see, the one, and that's what a true Christian is. He builds himself, his life, his works upon what Jesus did for him. Jesus has fulfilled the law. And the reason I do good is because of what Jesus has already done for me. Now the other person, they might be doing things, but it's for themselves. It's not because of what Jesus did. He says the floods will come. I was driving down by Pipe Creek a year ago, and the floods were coming. I thought, oh, this is a good example, the floods. But no, that's not the floods. The floods are, I saw a video of Thailand when the tsunami came in. When the tsunami comes in, you ought to see it. Nothing stays in its way. All the houses are washed away. That's the floods he's talking about. And the only one who stands, nobody can stand the Sermon on the Mount. We can't do those things. Jesus has already did them. He has already fulfilled that. So in Revelations, it talks about the great white throne, and some will stand before God, we're all going to stand before God, and the books are going to be open. And it says, heaven and earth fled away. That's the floods. Washes everything away. And the only way you can stand is if you're standing on what Jesus did. You see, Jesus fulfilled the law. I want to go back to Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. It says this, "Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also." Jesus was smitten on the right cheek. He was smitten on the left cheek. He was smitten again and again. He's the one who fulfilled this. He did this. He turned the other cheek. Verse 40, "And if any man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also." You know what they did? They took Jesus' coat. But not only that, they took all his clothes. They took it all. And he gave him. He did that. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him too. They compelled him to carry his cross. Not just 1 mile, but they all the way to Via Dolorosa. He carried the cross. Jesus fulfilled the Sermon on the Mount. He fulfilled the law. And so we stand, and he did it for us. In Romans chapter 8, it says, "For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh." The reason I got nervous reading the Sermon on the Mount is I thought, my flesh is weak. I can't do this. And God knew I couldn't do it. And he said, you're weak through the flesh, but so God sent his Son, and he did. He fulfilled the law. And now I can just stand on that rock. I can stand on Jesus Christ. And the floods can come. And Jesus is not going to collapse. And everything I do needs to be done because of what he did for me. Not so that God will do something for me, but because of what God's done for me. So, okay, let's take a minute and think about these things. Think about where you're at. Are you doing righteous things, or are you doing them for yourself? Are you doing righteous things because God loved you, because of what Jesus did for you, and you're standing upon the rock? So let's take a minute and think about these things and pray. Lord, we do thank you that you did it all for us, Lord, that we can cling to you, that sinners can come to you and be cleansed and be purified, and, Lord, can be righteous because of what you've done for us. Lord, help each of us here stand upon the rock, and, Lord, help us to rejoice in that and what you've done, and do things out of love, out of a good and pure heart. Lord, may the Holy Spirit do a work in each of our hearts, that we might do the works of God, and we ask it in Christ's name. Okay. All right. Well, I went a little bit over. I've been preparing for this for 2 months, so I kept getting longer and longer. So, all right. Well, we're going to dismiss, but there's some announcements. Kristen has an announcement. Yes.
So on the last Friday in February, the 26th, we're going to have a ladies' get together at our house, and the guys have done stuff and the ladies haven't. So hopefully this will be like the first of a lot of new things that we're going to do for ladies. So it's just going to be hanging out, and Amy Rock is going to lead the devotion for us, and we'll have food and hang out, and maybe a craft.
Yeah, we are selling a dozen of cookies for $12, again, for a fundraiser for Rush Camp. So I think we've got a sign-up sheet. Is that at the back table? Or you've got it? Okay. So see my wife Amanda if you want to buy some cookies from the youth group. If you remember from last year, they're really delicious, so make sure you buy some again. Also, we've got the Super Bowl Sunday party at my house for the youth group, so just remember to be there whenever the Super Bowl starts. I think it's like 5 o'clock or something like that on Sunday. So be there, and I think that's all we got. Yeah, sure will. Father, we thank you so much for bringing us here today, and we just pray that you would help us to remember that there's no way and chance that we can fulfill everything in the Beatitudes, but we know that you are the one that completed all the jots and the tittles and all the dotted I's and the crossed T's of the law. You're the only person that could ever fulfill all of those laws and the prophecies. And we thank you so much that you did that for us, that we in turn receive your righteousness and you receive our punishment. We thank you for all the love that you've shown us. We just pray that you would help us to show that same love to others and help to just fill us with your Spirit so that we might be a blessing to the world and to those that we know. And we thank you and in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.